What is capitalism? So, the classic definition of capitalism, I see nothing wrong with it. It's private ownership of the means of production. The means of production being factories, stores, that sort of thing. Anything that can be used uh, to produce, to run a business. Another way of describing capitalism is a market economy. So, things are bought and sold. They're produced, bought, and sold. And this would be probably like the first form of economy. Like if you go back to prehistoric times, people would be producing and then trading amongst each other, specializing. But there are other modes of production. You can have communism, socialism, where society owns the means of production, where production is directed by society, not private individuals for profit, but for the good of society or whatever. And then you have fascism, of course, another mode of production where the you have private enterprise, businesses nominally private, but the state sort of directs everything and plans. There's quotas, production quotas, and the state is really in charge to a very high degree. So there's different types of capitalism. One type is the free market capitalism or laissez-faire, and this is sort of in disrepute to a lot of people. I was taught anyway in school that it was like a bad thing. Uh, I don't believe that. I'm a believer in laissez-faire capitalism in the free market. I think that it works really well. So basically, this sort of capitalism, there's no real government intervention in the economy. That's what free means in free market, is that the government is not involved. So there's no regulations or minimal regulations, um, no subsidies, no taxes, that sort of thing. Basically, uh, what Rand referred to as the separation of state and economy. So, pretty much just a free for all with the proviso that you can't aggress against anybody. You can't use force or coercion. You've got to interact voluntarily within the market economy. You can't steal or rob or use force to get your way. You have to just sort of buy and sell stuff. But there's different types of capitalism. So, for example, the sort of South Korean model where the government was much more involved in planning the economy and well, you saw government planning during World War II in America very strongly. Um, and another sort of model of capitalism or thing that happens within capitalism is interventionism. So there's a lot of ways the government can intervene in the market economy. They can subsidize a particular form of industry. So this one's pretty popular. A lot of people favor subsidies for whatever reason. There's the infant industry argument where you got to subsidize an industry when it's just young so that it can grow and be on sort of a level playing field with foreign businesses. And I don't buy that argument. I don't subscribe to it. But that's like another sort of model of capitalism is where you have the government playing a more active role in planning the economy, putting taxes on things like like sin taxes on alcohol because you don't want people to drink, or on tobacco because you don't want people to smoke, or you do want them to smoke, but you just want them to pay taxes while they do it. If you're addicted to cigarettes, then the demand for cigarettes is relatively inelastic. So another model is welfare state capitalism, which you got a welfare state, you've got unemployment insurance or socialized medicine or welfare for if you're looking to find work. Um, so so when did capitalism originate? I think a lot of people would say in England during the Industrial Revolution, but really capitalism predates that. There was the Dutch Golden Age, which was basically right before England industrialized, and that was a very uh, market-based economy. Um, they were a nation of traders, and basically they were capitalist. So so if we look at the word capitalism, well, capital in this context refers to man-made factors of production, like factories or a taxi cab or a hoe, anything that's not nature, it's not labor, it's man-made that is used for production. So a computer could be that. Of course, computer could be a consumer good, but it can be used for production. A desk, anything like that that was made by man. That's capital. So capitalism, seems to be really focused on capital, on building capital, capital accumulation. That's sort of the model of progress within capitalism, is that capital accumulates and workers become more productive and wages increase. Um, so yeah, even before England, there was the Italian city-states, which were very capitalist, and even sort of dates back to the Middle Ages. Really, you could argue, prehistoric time periods as well. Of course, a lot of the earliest societies, like Egypt or Sumer or Persia, these were more like authoritarian, absolute governments, absolute monarchs. Like the case of Egypt, the pharaoh actually was God, and in Sumer the priests were had a very very powerful role in society as well. And there's an interesting theory called the hydraulic civilization hypothesis by Carl Wittfogel, and he argued that societies which require irrigation to develop tend towards an absolute ruler because they need that sort of centralized power to organize the irrigation. Um, okay, so so why? But mostly when we talk about capitalism, we think of like England and the United States and France, like after the Industrial Revolution. So why did capitalism develop in those countries at that time period? And the reason is because of liberalism. So liberalism was a great intellectual movement that arose as a reaction against absolutism and mercantilism. Absolutism was a political philosophy that developed between the 14th and 18th century. And the idea was pretty simple: the king gets to do whatever the heck he wants, and everybody else has to just fall in line. Um, Not the greatest or noblest of political philosophies, but it had its heyday, and it all started with Philip IV, Philip the Fair, as he's called. And before that, there was really no taxes to speak of. He started taxing people, and he had to fund his wars. He was very aggressive with his neighbors, and so he started taxing the Jews and the Lombards, these wealthy merchants, and the fairs. And he actually caused the Great Death, the plague, that devastated Europe. Because what happened was he taxed the fairs at Champagne and basically ended the fairs. And these were very important centers of international commerce. And he basically triggered like a huge recession in all of Europe. And as a result, when the Black Plague struck, because living standards were lessened by the Depression, it was especially fierce, and that's why everyone died. So, anyway, that was the start of absolutism, and it sort of reached its peak with Louis the 14th, I want to say. Anyway, and then the French Revolution, um, and so mercantilism was the economic ideology that accompanied absolutism. Okay, so absolutism, the idea that the sovereign can do anything and he's all powerful, everybody must obey. And so mercantilism is the economic doctrine associated with that. So if the king says, okay, I'm going to give a monopoly to my buddy here on trade, the mercantilist would write some pamphlet on why it's important that guy gets a monopoly. Or if they set a quota on imports, they would rationalize why the quota on imports is a good thing, protect domestic industry or whatever. So mercantilism is a very cowl ideology. It's basically just simping for the king, if I may use the modern parlance. And so what is liberalism? So liberalism, liberty, it was basically just a freedom movement. It was all about liberty, all about people should be free to do whatever the hell they want, so long as they're not hurting anybody else. So long as, or as John Stuart Mill put it, the only reason why power can be exercised against a member of the community is to prevent harm from being done to some other member. So, so liberalism was a great movement, very profound movement, and centuries of liberal intellectuals attacking monopoly privilege, talking about individual rights, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. These were new concepts. Freedom of the press. It was very common before liberalism. Books would get banned, and there just wasn't this idea that you should be able to say or think whatever you want. That wasn't a thing. But the liberals did that. So many of the rights and freedoms that we take for granted today were hard fought by the liberals. The right against self-incrimination. Before that, the police could torture you and make you confess. But there was this heroic individual, and they tortured him, and he said, "No, I'm not going to tell on myself. I don't have to." And that's how that sort of right got enshrined in law. Very important right. Um, so so liberals, people like John Locke, Turgot, James Mill, they had their idea of freedom and restraining the sovereign and the rights of the individual, free markets, peace, gold standard, um, and it was their efforts which brought about the conditions that enabled the Industrial Revolution to occur. So in England, they sort of deregulated. They eliminated the Corn Laws. They eliminated the Statute of Artificers, which set wages, and it was really a sweeping change to society, just a sea change in the way that things were viewed. And the economic philosophy of liberalism was laissez-faire. Uh, they also challenged some sort of medieval doctrines, like the idea that the acquisition of wealth was evil, which was very important because if you're going to have a modern industrial society, you need some ridiculously rich people like Rockefeller or Andrew Carnegie, that built these massive industries that create all the wealth that we enjoy today. Um, and if you look at a society like China, so China was much more advanced than Europe for thousands of years, but they had sort of an arrested civilization because they went too hard on egalitarianism, and that prevented them from becoming industrialized. Um, so philosophies matter, ideas matter. Sometimes inequality can be a good thing because if everybody has like an equal amount of wealth, nobody can open a factory. Nobody's rich enough to open a factory, and that's industrialization led to skyrocketing production output from England, and skyrocketing living standards for the workers, for the poor. Who, by the way, that's what the factories were producing stuff for, was for the poor. Um, People say that Ford paid his own workers more so they could buy his cars, which that doesn't really make sense. But it's true that the whole of the factory system, like they were both producing goods and consuming them. Because the rich people, they wanted like fine goods from like skilled craftsmen. They don't want this cheap mass-produced crap. It was working class stuff that the factories were producing. Um, so also entrepreneurship was very important. It's a key aspect of capitalism. The entrepreneur, the invested risk taker. That's really how factors of production are aligned with consumer demand. Is the action of entrepreneurs. That's what an entrepreneur is. Somebody who sees how production is presently and envisions how it can be superiorly readjusted. Um, so we see, because of liberalism and the impact it had, we see the power of ideas in shaping history, and this is in direct conflict with the Marxian idea that history is um, like determined. There's like a scientific progression of history, and it's all about economic conditions, material conditions, and it's just going down a path. Uh, that's not so. There is no predetermined path, and it's ideas that are really affecting change. You can see this in the free trade movement that came about because of ideas. People advocated for free trade, and it did a lot of good. And this is also sort of the decline of capitalism is because of the power of ideas. In this case, it's the idea of welfarism and socialism and etatism, statism, government power. Uh, so just as liberals paved the way for capitalism, now socialist intellectuals are paving the way for the decline of capitalism. Anyway, that's my TED Talk. Uh, yeah, I hope you enjoyed that and something to think about. I'd love to know your opinions on capitalism. What you think about what I said? Is it true? Is it false? That's all for now.